This is the only asset I owned 6 years ago, and now I've invested it in over $10 million into real estate rental properties. Most people struggle to get started in real estate and grow a portfolio because they lack either time or money. I lacked both at the beginning, so don't worry. If you're lacking time or money, by the end of the video, I'm gonna explain how I've borrowed both within a few years to get to 10 million. Step one is always learning something, so it's time, spending time into a topic. What you're doing right now is probably consuming content and learning about real estate. 5 to 20 hours a week is what I found is a healthy range to lay the foundation of knowledge within a few months. So here's what I did at the beginning. It was about a year for me. I'm a slow learner, so bear that in mind. But it took me about a year of spending 20 hours a week. I was running a business though at the time. I had no time available. At least I didn't think I did. I was like 60 to 80 hours a week running a business. It was my first business. I had like a dozen employees. I was flat out. And I knew I wanted to start exiting that business and doing real estate, but I needed to spend more time doing it and learning it to be able to exit. So it had to get worse before it got better. If you're in the position right now where you're in a 9-to-5 job or even like a 9-to-9 job, you're working a bunch, you have a family, you don't have much time, here's what I did to find the time. Because we can't make more time, we all have 24/7, but it's a matter of prioritizing the time if it's important to you to reach financial freedom, freedom of time, freedom of location, right? Cash flow is important to do that. Here's what we did. So I realized I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an hour a day, doing nothing while I was eating. That's an hour a day that I could watch YouTube videos. So 1 hour per day, which was just YouTube videos on real estate. And I was also driving and exercising for an hour a day. So while I was doing that, I was just listening to music. That was time where I could now listen to real estate podcasts because we have to lay that foundation of knowledge somehow. So I just did podcasts, and then I also had to start applying it. So I kept learning and learning and learning, but I was almost over-consuming, going into paralysis analysis. And many people get stuck because there's so much information in real estate. You just have to start doing it at some point in time. So here's what I did, and this is where a lot of people get stuck. They just learn, and then they don't have any property. What I recommend to my clients at rentalconsultant.com to get into action is spending an hour a day just simply finding and analyzing deals, right? So an hour a day, that'd be analyzing. And then while you're analyzing, that would be calling realtors, getting information, putting it into a spreadsheet, doing a walkthrough of the property, even virtually on Zoom. This is about 3 hours a day. I did it Monday to Friday, 15 hours a week. Now, as a bonus, I was spending, the weekends doing conferences, events, meetups. I realized that the network is really important, and the network is the net worth. Everyone knows that, but it's just like, it's important actually, when you're doing real estate, getting into a network and getting into connections with people that are actually doing it, right? So that was about 20 hours a week between this and then the weekend for conferences, meetups, and events. Once I figured out how to do real estate at a big picture, I wanted to do multifamily buy and holds, long-term rentals, and even some short-term rental Airbnbs. So I knew what I wanted to do. I had a plan. I didn't have the money. So I had to get about $50,000 somehow, some way, I didn't have it, to get into real estate. The barrier to entry in real estate is a bit more than like Bitcoin or stocks, where you could spend 10 or 20 bucks to get in. I found you could do it for less, but 50,000 is like a healthy starting point. People always ask me, how much should I have saved? I say, well, you could have less, but 50,000 is like a nice starting point to buy like a good multifamily, not in like Toronto or Vancouver or New York or anywhere downtown important, but to get into like a good market where it's based on cash flow, not necessarily as much appreciation. That's a topic for another day. But $50,000, I didn't have the money. Here's the kicker. I had to kind of shift my mindset because at this point in time, I had very little money saved, but I realized that other people had the money. $250 billion in cash, in bank accounts in Canada right now. So think about that. I'm gonna write that on the board. So 250 billion, that's in Canada, right? In the bank accounts. By the way, this is according to Stats Canada and Economist. In the US, there's 950 billion, that's with a B, in cash in bank accounts. It wasn't in my bank account, but it was in someone's bank account. Now it was just a matter of how do you go and get it. In the same article that this was posted, I looked it up, it had $18 trillion in liquid assets, which is pretty wild in the US. There's lots of money available. Now it's a matter of how do you go and get it. So that's the next topic. That's step 3. So once I figured out the learning and I had that foundation of knowledge and I realized that there's a bunch of money in the world, it didn't have to be in my bank account, but it was in someone's. Step 3 is OPM, other people's money. So there's 3 different strategies that I used. Are there more? Of course there's more. Some people just use one of the three or one of these and they go all in and they grow their portfolio with just that one strategy. I use it like kind of a blended model between the three of them. So joint venturing. Well, let me backtrack. So everyone hits a brick wall. I don't care who you are. I'm sure there's a few people out there that don't, but most people hit a brick wall when it comes to cash that they have saved and their mortgage capability with the banks. When you hit that brick wall, you gotta ask yourself, how do you keep going if you didn't hit your cash flow goal yet? If your goal is to get to $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month or even $15,000+ a month in cash flow recurring to leave a job or to be financially free, retire, whatever the case is. If you're not there yet and you get capped out with mortgages or you run out of cash, this is your best friend, OPM. Not the type of drug, but the other people's money. Joint venturing, that's what I did mainly at the beginning. So I learned how to use joint venturing. I spent that time, that 20+ hours a week, in learning how to co-own property. I basically put time into learning how to find properties and analyze properties, find good deals. There's a really good book, I'm not affiliated, Stefan Ernia wrote a book called Money, People, Deal. If you find the deal, the money and the people will come to you eventually. So get good at finding the deal. So that's what I did with joint venturing, was finding that deal and then making sure I could actually oversee any renovation management and oversee the property management and the financial management at the end, right? Vendor take-back mortgages, AKA seller financing. That's when the actual owner of the property holds on to the mortgage. Usually you do this when they own the property outright or the majority of the property in cash, because they can now act as the bank. So if you're getting capped out with mortgages at the bank, go and get yourself some VTBs. They're not as strict as the banks. The banks might cut you off, but a lot of the time investors that are selling their multifamily, duplex, triplex, fiveplex, tenplex, they're gonna be a little bit more lenient in giving you favorable terms, especially if you can give them like what they're looking for their top line price. So vendor takebacks, you make the mortgage payments to them as the seller, and it works really well. So maybe they give you an 80% loan to value on the property. That would mean that there's a 20% down payment remaining. If they're okay with it, you could get private lending. Private lending is from an individual, right? You can get private lending from an individual at a favorable interest rate as the top up. So now you're financed with these two at 100%. So this is like the blended model. This is what allowed me to get to, well, 10 million, but essentially I got capped around 2.5 million, which takes me to step 4. So around 2.5 million, I was 6 properties in, I ran out of steam. I was just exhausted. Between my business that I was still running at the time and doing this for now 30 to 40 hours a week, where I was on site, re-renting units to tenants, dealing with maintenance and contractors. I was still finding properties and analyzing properties and doing walkthroughs in person. It was brutal. Like, I hit a point where I almost sold them all. And so I had to figure out how to systematize the business, put together training videos, SOPs, and checklists so I could actually download what was in my mind that I was doing day to day and have someone else to do it. Here's the thing I hear all the time. When people get to a couple properties and they're still working a job or running a business, they usually get stuck because they just think they're the only ones that can actually do this. That's not the truth. Someone else can also do it. You just have to be able to train them. So this is the whole concept of working on the business, not in the business. How do we do that? Well, we have to actually download what we're doing into a format that someone else can do it. That's what we've done, and it took me years to be able to figure out how to do that. Rentalconsultant.com was born off the back of just the systems, the trainings, the checklists, everything that you could just take and plug into your current business so that you can hire in people and outsource and scale up. Because there comes a point in time where, yeah, you're gonna run out of cash or mortgage capability, but you're certainly gonna run out of time as well. And so when you get to the OPM point, you can use these. OPT, you gotta use an asset manager. That's what I called it, at least. So an asset manager was someone that could actually do what I was doing for 30 to 40 hours a week. It was a full-time role for me. Does it have to be full-time? No, it can be fractional. We do that as well at rentalconsultant.com. We have fractional asset managers. If you're interested, let us know. This is step 4 though. This is what allowed me to go from 2.5 million to over 10 million. And so it came down to training the asset manager on acquisition, finding and analyzing deals, renovation management, finding contractors, screening them, getting quotes, managing the schedule and the timeline and the budget of the reno, property management, being able to find a good tenant, select that tenant, deal with maintenance, that long-term kind of management. So these basically took up 30 to 40 hours a week for that asset manager. Now, the question is, do you go local, meaning where you live in the US or in Canada, or do you go overseas? For me, I went into Eastern Europe. It was about $5 to $10 an hour, so $5 to $10 an hour. The local rates were like quadruple that quite easily, and it just didn't make sense for me as a startup. I didn't have like a super profitable business at that point. 2.5 million, you're not very big. You have a couple properties, they were doing okay for cash flow, but we certainly couldn't afford like, thousands, like 5,000 plus a month in asset manager fees. We could afford like 1,000, maybe 1,500 at most. So that worked really well for an asset manager. I found someone that spoke English as their first language, had a property management background in England, managing over 200 units, and now lived in Portugal. So it was pretty sweet, like an exact type of person that I needed. Yes, they weren't local boots on the ground, but I could hire local people that were much cheaper that could actually do any re-renting on the ground and do the maintenance on the ground. Those people have to be actually local where the properties exist. But anything from a laptop or a cell phone, I could outsource to the asset manager. So I downloaded everything I had in the checklists, SOPs, training videos, plugged them into that, trained them on it, and then I was able to scale this thing. Here's the best part. I went from working 30 to 40 hours a week at 2.5 million to working an hour a week at 10 million. 2 30-minute meetings per week on Zoom with the asset manager to check in, make sure I understood what was going on, answer questions. Sometimes there was problems that were higher level problems that they needed my input on. I could help out, and so that's what allowed us to go to 10 million. My guess is from 10 to 100 million. It's just really more of these two, OPM and OPT. Hopefully you find this valuable, and we'll talk to you soon.